In this video, we're going to talk about the Xlookup function. So the purpose is to search a range or an array and then return a corresponding value from another range or array. And it's a function you use all of the time. So let's take a look. What does this mean to search a range and an array and then return a corresponding value? So here's an example. Let's say you've downloaded data, employee data from your HR database. So I have people's names, their department, report date, hire date, days of employment, salary, bonus, blah, blah, blah. So data about employees. Well, then your boss comes to you and says, hey, we need to calculate the monthly insurance contribution for these employees. And that calculation is 10% of their monthly salary. So I have this person, Kathleen Adams, and I need to figure out her yearly salary. Well, it's over here in this employee data. Well, of course, I could just type that, right? But then I have this person. So I'd have to look for Joan Aguila, or however you pronounce that, and go, oh, there's her salary, and type that. Now, of course, with just this many employees, no big deal. But if I had hundreds of employees and I was searching through a database of 1,000 records over here, it would be painful. So that's what Xlookup does. Looking at that again, search a range or an array and then return the corresponding value. We're going to search through here for somebody's name and then we're going to return a corresponding value. Every function you learn, you need to understand the parameters that it needs. So in this case, Xlookup says, well, what value am I looking up? In this example, we're going to be looking up Kathleen Adams. Where do I look for that? Where is this lookup array? And that'll be right here. And finally, what's the return array? That will be the yearly salary in this example. Maybe I want to return the number of sick days, or maybe I want to return a performance rating, or the hire date, or the department. Whatever, it's up for you to decide what am I trying to return when I find this person's name. Okay, there's a few other parameters. One is, what if I don't find the name over in that list of the lookup array? What do you want me to put into the cell if I don't find it? And then you can just leave the cell blank or put in can't find. And finally, match mode. If you don't type anything there, it means it's going to be an exact match, and we'll talk about that in a minute. If you need to do a close match, which as you can see by these sheet names, we're going to be doing that also in a minute, then we're going to put -1. So in this class, we're going to be either using 0 or -1, and we never deal with the search mode in this class. Basically, how do I want to do the search? So let's do an example, and here it is. We've already set this up. I need to find these people's yearly salary. And once I have their yearly salary, we can do the math to convert it to monthly salary, and then 10% of the monthly salary is the actual insurance contribution. So let's get started. I'll zoom in here just a little bit. We'll go equal Xlookup. And now, what are the parameters? The lookup value. Well, what am I trying to look up? I want to look up this employee, comma, look up array. Where am I going to look for it? And so we're going to look through this full name column. So I'll scroll through all of these names right here. Now I need to absolute this lookup array because we're going to be copying this formula down, because later we want to look up Joan and Victor and Ryan. So don't forget to absolute your lookup array. And then if we find the name in the lookup array, if we find the lookup value in the lookup array, what's our return array? And now we have to match perfectly. That's going to be the yearly salary. So we'll drag through that data. And the same idea is I need to absolute that array, because as we copy this formula down, I don't want this red box or this purple box to move. Now, what if we don't find Kathleen's name in this list? Well, we can put 2 quotes, which would mean leave the cell blank. Or we could put, just put the message, can't find. So it's up to you. What do you want to display in this cell B6 when I look up the name Kathleen Adams? And finally, there's this notion of match mode. And right now, we're going to do an exact match, which is the default setting, meaning we don't have to type a 0. We could just leave it off. And why is this an exact match? Because I'm looking up Kathleen Adams' name, and I want to find it exactly. I don't want to get close. Like, what if somebody was named Kathleen Jones? Well, that's a close match, and so then we would maybe return somebody's salary. No, we want to match exactly in this case. So you could type a 0 or leave it off because, like I said, that's the default. And finally, we're done. You can just close that up. Now look, it returned 27,600. And the beauty is, remember, A6 is relative. So I can now drag this down, and Joan is returning 89. So here's Joan, and sure enough, she's 89,556. And then I can drag it down, and Victor Allen, where's Victor? Right here earns 156.89. So that's the beauty of Xlookup. If I have 100 employees and I need to look up some information about them, I can use this one formula. Now, the monthly salary is just simply taking the yearly salary and dividing it by 12. I could do that right here. I'm going to take this and divide it by 12, and that gives me the monthly salary. And then what is their contribution? It's 10% of that. So I could take this, multiply that 10%. Don't forget to absolute that times their monthly salary. So there we go. We have that. Now, rather than doing it in 3 columns like this, I could change this to their insurance contribution. I'm going to do it in one formula, insurance contribution. Okay, so let's get rid of these for a minute. I'm just going to hit delete. This Xlookup is returning a number, right? We can see the number. It's right there, 27,600. I can now do math on that number in this exact same cell. So right here, I can take and divide by 12. Notice it's outside the parenthesis. I got to close up the Xlookup. That last parenthesis, I close it up, and I can divide by 12. And now I need to multiply that by 10%. So I'm going to go ahead and put my parentheses around that and go times 10%. Don't forget to absolute that 10% as we drag this formula down. The point I'm trying to make is, let's get rid of these two formulas, is basically you can do this all in one fell swoop. You can do math. Once a function returns a number, I can then do math on that number. Divided by 12 times 10%. And now in one formula, I'm calculating people's insurance contribution. All right, let's do another Xlookup practice. Let's go to an order form. We'll do a couple different things here. I have a table that shows if the delivery is standard, it takes 5 days. 3-day delivery takes 3 days, makes sense. 2 days, 2, overnight is 1. Your user has a little drop-down list, which we'll learn how to do later in the quarter. They can choose what the delivery is. I need to return how many days that will take from this table. So that's the Xlookup function. So right here, we're going to type equal Xlookup. I need to know, what did the user choose in cell C16? Did they choose overnight, 2-day, 3-day standard? What did they choose? I don't know. We're going to look it up. C16. Where is the array that I look, where I'm going to look for that? And that's going to be right here. And now, just out of habit, I'm going to absolute that, although we're not really dragging this formula anywhere, so you could get away with not absoluting the lookup array. If I find overnight in that red box right here, what's my return array? Well, that's going to be this box right there. And again, just out of habit, I will absolute it. And if not found, I'm just going to leave that blank also. And we'll hit enter because we are going to do an exact match, meaning the word overnight has to match the word overnight exactly. Now if we go standard, notice this returns a 5-day. If it's a 3-day, of course it returns 3, and 2-day returns 2. And now I can add that to whatever today's date is to give them a delivery date. We won't go there. One more practice. Your user is entering these item IDs, right? So we're buying different stuff. And so here's an item ID, And then based off that, we have the name of the thing and the price. So when somebody types BD008, I want to know the name and I want to know the price. So again, that's the perfect example of using an Xlookup. Now we're going to do something kind of cool. So, whoops, that wasn't so cool. Equal Xlookup. What is my lookup value? Well, remember, your user is typing an item ID, BD008, as an example, comma. Where am I going to look for that? So here is my lookup array. I am going to look through all of these item IDs, right through there, okay? I am going to be copying this formula down, so we need to absolute that lookup array, comma, what's the return array? Notice this is bold. Now this is the one thing that's a little tricky. First, what am I trying to return? I'm trying to return the name. So that's not so tricky. This is what we've done in the past. We're just going to return the name. I'll show you in a second the tricky part. So there you go. Don't forget to absolute this, function of 4. And finally, if it's not found, comma, notice if not found is bold. I'm going to go quote, quote. We're going to leave the cell blank. And the match mode, again, is an exact match, so we can leave that blank because 0 is the default. So that returns the name. Now I need the price. So again, I could do an Xlookup, and I would look up the item ID through this range, comma, I would do the return, would be the price. Okay, you get the idea. But here's the kind of cool thing. On this Xlookup, when we said return array, J4 to J50, we could actually make it J4 to K50. We're going to return 2 things at once. So J4 to K50, I am going to absolute that. And watch what happens. This formula does what's called a spill. So notice when I click in this cell, this is in the formula bar kind of grayed out. If I click up there and try to edit it, it won't let me, and I get this hashtag spill saying, whoa, you ruined my formula. So basically this Xlookup is returning 2 things, the name and the price. And the reason it works is because they're right next to each other. So in the return array, I can put J4 to K50, 2 columns, and it will return 2 things, and it does, again, what's called a spill. It spills across 2 columns right here. Now the beauty of this formula is I can drag it down. Now remember when we said, hey, if you can't find it, leave the cell blank? That's what it's doing. So when your user types DH011 over here, boom, it automatically fills this in, Victoria Mansion Deluxe. What if your user types BH008? Bam, all of a sudden you have whatever that is, 4-piece white bedroom, $21.99. So your user can just keep adding items, and this formula is sitting here, and it will populate the name and the price. Enough of the exact matches. What do we mean by a close match? Let's go to another example. So here's the deal. I want to return a bonus, but their bonus is based off how many days they've been employed with us. So if it's been 0 to 730 days, which is basically 2 years, they're going to get 10% of their salary. If they go from 731 to 1825, these kind of random numbers, they get 15% of their salary. 1826 to 3650, 10 years, 18%. Anyway, you get the idea. So guess what happens? Your boss hands you a list of names and says, hey, we need to calculate their bonus. Well, the first thing we need to do is figure out their base salary or their annual salary. I think we called it annual salary over here in this example, yearly salary. So we'll relabel this to yearly salary just to be consistent. Okay, I need to look that up. And then I need to look up their days of employment, which is also over here. So I need yearly salary, days of employment, and then finally we're going to return this percentage. Okay, so let's just do real quickly the yearly salary. So we've already done this. I know we're going to look up Kathleen's name. Where is that lookup array? So at this point, notice that's bold. I have to click on this other sheet and drag through this array. And don't forget to absolute it, comma. And notice when I clicked on this sheet, it puts the sheet name. Okay, so now I'm going to type comma, and while I'm here, I will grab the yearly salary. So I'll drag through this range. Perfect. Don't forget to absolute it. And now, what is my mode? It is exact. We want to match her name exactly. So we'll not worry about if not found, and we'll not worry about the match mode because it defaults to exact. So far, so good. Now we want to get the days of employment. So I, being a little bit lazy, I'm going to lock in on column B. I'm going to put a $sign right there. I'm going to drag this Xlookup across. And the only thing I'm going to fix is instead of returning the yearly salary, I'm going to return the days of employment, which is in column K. So I can run over here and just fix this. I'll make it column K. KK. And now we have days of employment, 1795. Yep, that seems to be right. We kind of have our formatting goofed up. Let's just put that back to a regular old general, I guess, 1795. There we go. Now, what is the bonus percentage she gets? Here's where we run into what's called a close match. Notice Kathleen has worked 1,795 days, 1,795 days, right? That's in between these two numbers, right? There's not going to be an exact match, but it's going to be between two values. And so her bonus is 15% of her annual salary. Cool? Now, this is just a text box. I need to put this information in a way that I can use it in my Xlookup. And this yellow box is important, and you will be using it later in the quarter. And that is, I have to convert this schedule, if you will, into a usable table for Xlookup. And right here is the rules that you need. So maybe I'll make it purple. That's the important part. You need to use the lowest value out of each interval. So 0, 731, 1826, 3,650. That's the lowest value out of each of these intervals. And then you put in the corresponding rate, 10, 15, 18, 20. Okay, so that's how you set up that table. Now let's do our Xlookup. We're going to look up not the name this time, right? This table doesn't have people's names. What it has is their days of employment schedule. So we're going to look up Kathleen. How long has she been employed with us? 1795. Comma. What's my lookup array? It is right there. And we better absolute that. Comma. What's the return array? Remember, I'm trying to return this percentage. And in this case, Kathleen's going to get 15%. Don't forget to absolute that. If not found, fine, we'll go negative. But this time, we could not ignore match mode. It is not an exact match, right? 1795 will not match exactly these numbers. So you don't see 1795 down here, right? You're going to have a range of numbers for people's employment, and we need to figure out where it fits in these intervals. So it is a -1 exact match or next smaller item. So what that means is it grabs the 1795 and it starts at the top, and this has to be sorted in an ascending way like it is, right? And Xlookup will start at the top, and it finds the largest value that it can that's still smaller than the lookup value, 1795. So in other words, it goes here and goes, this is 0. Is there one larger? Yep, 731. Perfect. Is there one larger? Yep, 1826. But 1795 is smaller than that, so it has to come back to this one, and then it'll return the 15%. So that's how that works. You need this to be -1, and then it's going to return the 15%. We got some format issues. We'll make it percentage. There you go. That's her percentage. Now that we've done these 3 Xlookups, this one being a close match, we can go ahead and copy those down and get everybody's percentage. So look at Nicholas here. It's 200. Oh, doesn't matter about salary. Look at Nicholas, 846 days. So where is that in this range? It's right here. He should also get 15%. Clay's only worked 378 days, so that's between 0 and 7. He gets 10%. So anyway, that's a close match. Let's do one more example, and then we can wrap up this video. Very often, if you go out to the irs.gov website, they'll have tax tables, right? So in other words, if you earn between 0 and 10,000, your tax rate is 10%. If you earn between this to this, it's 12%. 41 to 89, you're 22%. 89 to 170, you're 24%, etc. And of course, your boss says, hey, I need to take people's yearly salary and figure out their tax rate. Okay, well, if you've downloaded this, in fact, I did. I copied this from the IRS website. Remember, I need to get this into a form that I can use it. And what was the rule that we did on the previous sheet? Well, I moved it over to this sheet. It's right here. Use the lowest value out of each interval with the corresponding rate. Okay, so in other words, what's the lowest value in this interval? 0. What's the lowest value here? 10,276, 41,776, 89, blah, blah, blah. So you don't have to watch me type. I went ahead and already populated our table. Remember, this is a 0 in accounting format. 10%. There's that value, 12%, 41, 22%. So now I have my table ready to go. So one more time, we'll look up Kathleen's yearly salary. Xlookup, we're going to look up her name, comma. We'll run over to this sheet. We'll drag through, you've seen this 100 times already. We'll drag through those names and absolute it. And then we're going to return the yearly salary. So we'll drag through those names, absolute it. And then do we do anything else? Nope. Is this an exact match or a close match? It's exact. Remember, I'm looking up Kathleen's name. I want to match her name over here exactly. So I will go ahead and close up that Xlookup. Now we need the tax rate based off that salary. So what interval is she between? Right there. So her tax rate's 12%. I can see that. Well, we want to use an Xlookup to figure that out. I'm going to look up the yearly salary, comma. I'm going to look for it right through here, absolute. What is the return array? Well, I'm going to return their tax rate right through here, absolute. And then finally, if not found, we'll leave the cell blank. Is this an exact match? No, right? 27,600 is not going to match exactly in here. People's salaries are going to be all over the place, and so you will not have an exact match. So this is where we will have an exact match or the next smaller item. So it's important that you do the -1 and close this up. So what does that mean? Or the next smaller item? The Xlookup will grab this 27,260 and it runs through this list and goes, is there one bigger? Yep, right here. Is there? And I should say, is it bigger and still is this still smaller than that larger number? So it grabs this one and goes, oh, this one's bigger. I can go with this. This one's bigger, but this is too big because it's larger than the 2760 where the 10 isn't. So then it'll come back to here and return the 12%. So there's our 12%. We'll format it as a percentage. And now those formulas are ready to drag down. I'm immediately returning everybody's percentage. So how about this guy, 89,556? Where is that? That's right here. 89,556 is in that interval, so he should have 24%. 150 is also in that same interval, so 24%. We do have a problem with this guy. Why is that returning 37%? I have a hiccup in my formula. I found it right here. I have a typo. This is supposed to be 539901. And so, as I mentioned earlier, when you do a close match, these numbers, the lowest value out of each interval, need to be sorted in ascending order. And so, obviously, that number is wrong, but if it was right, it can't be down there. It'd have to be 59 or whatever it was. It wouldn't have to be in between 41 and 89. Now this is right, and our person's rate, the 69,000 person ended up at 22%, which makes sense. That's the value that's in between those intervals. So that's it for Xlookup. I'll just tell you that we use it a lot in this course, and in general, if you work for a company and you're doing work in Excel, Xlookup will be a formula or a function that you use all the time. So you want to get good at it. What I recognize as being the trickiest part for students is recognizing when they need an exact match versus a close match. And these two examples are good ones on when you use a close match. Is when you have intervals of numbers and the thing you're looking up isn't going to match exactly. It's going to be between numbers. And so that's when you do a close match. But when I'm looking up people's names, or in this case, there was the item ID off of this list, well, those are when you want to do an exact match.